Welcome to the podcast Life After Addiction and Indictment. I'm your host, Steve Cloward, and I spent most of the last decade and well over $100,000 on coaches, consultants, masterminds, and events trying to figure out how to reclaim my life again. On this podcast, I'm going to share the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the hacks that allowed me to forgive myself so that I could reclaim my life again. I'll be interviewing experts in mindset, leadership, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, branding, and so much more. I'm glad you're here. Sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Let's go! This is Life After Addiction and Indictment.
Hey folks, welcome back to Life After Addiction and Indictment. Today I've got a gentleman who I'm excited to talk about. He's got a lot of great information to really benefit, the loved ones of addicts, people who are struggling with addiction, and I just want to welcome to the show today, Darryl Rodgers. How are you today, Darryl?
Doing great. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I'm really excited to, the wisdom and the insights that you've got as a parent who, lost a son who was battling addiction. To get started, maybe why don't you tell us, obviously a little bit about your son, your family, and I read that it was an accident, and kind of give us some information about, what took place, and then we'll kind of go from there, if that's all right.
Okay, sure. So yeah, Chase was my oldest of two boys. They're 7 years apart, Chase and Justin. And Chase, good kid growing up, diagnosed ADD, ADHD early on. So really high energy, made him a great athlete, small, but quick and agile, and loved sports and just played all out every time he played. Both of my boys went on to become Eagle Scouts. We're a Christian family. My dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, so
oh wow!
So I grew up in the Southern Baptist church, little country church in South Carolina.
No, really in South Carolina. What part?
Yeah, close to Columbia,
Really?
Yeah, a rural area there that, a little farm community. And I really consider that home, beautiful countryside.
Yeah, I grew up, in the Mormon church, and so I went on a mission at age 19, and my mission was Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh, really? How about that? That's neat.
I was down there, worked closer to Charleston. In fact, my first little city was called Goose Creek.
Yeah, I know that area well. I was down that way not too long ago, and I have family in that area. I have family all over South Carolina, really.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's home for me, but I've been here over 30 years now. And I guess this is home now. But Chase, good kid. Like I said, and then it was really in about the 10th grade that I began to detect some issues with him. Well, he was my first teenager, right? And I was still trying to figure things out. And all of a sudden I'm getting these warning signs, and I'm thinking that, well, is this just what a normal teenage boy goes through? And I think some of it was. I don't know for sure when his drug experimentations began. I was suspecting that it was beginning then, but at any rate, he had always been an average student. He had a little trouble sitting still and focusing in the classroom, but he had always been, he was a smart kid, had always been an average student. But now all of a sudden his grades were dropping, and he was developing an attitude, very becoming rebellious, and I could see different things going on. And I was trying to talk to him about it, wasn't making a lot of progress. And so he transferred, with pressure from me, he transferred to a military school in Virginia, the middle of his junior year. And he was able to bring his grades up there. I felt like I have a military background myself, and I felt like the structured environment and the discipline would be good for him. And I think it was,
Yeah.
He still was having some issues with behavior while he was there, and there were some other kids there who were having even worse issues than him. I would say that there were some really good kids there who, when I say good kids, kids who were there to learn and to further themselves, and then there were kids that were there because they had issues, and they tend to the kids who are having difficulties or who are getting into trouble tend to attract each other, right?
I'll say.
Creates even more issues. And but he graduated. He had a really good senior year of football there. Graduated, and there were a couple of colleges, smaller schools like Division II athletic type schools that reached out to him, and he ended up accepting some scholarship money to go attend college and play football at a school in Illinois. And he headed up that way. And unfortunately, it wasn't long after he arrived there that he began to hang out with people who were using drugs and alcohol. And pretty soon he was doing the same thing. And he dropped out early on in his second semester of his freshman year, came back home, immediately gravitated to an even rougher crowd at home. And we did have an intervention at one point, and he did go to treatment, and then spent about 9 months in South Florida because he went from treatment to a halfway house, ended up bouncing around to a lot of different halfway houses there at the time, and came back home, moved back in. Looking back on that now, I would advise any parent, when your child, especially if we're not talking about a teenager here. Yeah. Chase was 20 at the time, or 19, 20, going on 20. I would advise any parent in that situation, and, if at all possible, to avoid allowing your child to move back in with you once they've been to treatment.
Protect against enabling behavior and things like that, or
and that is sort of a recipe for relapse. And I had not really done my homework at the time on addiction. I didn't understand addiction, and from you don't know what you don't know. And from my perspective at that point, Chase had this problem, and I was sending him to treatment, and he was going to come back. They were going to, take care of this problem. They're going to fix the problem. Right. And, I didn't understand my proper role in the recovery process.
That's a difficult situation especially as a parent, but even a spouse, or, even a close, good friend, because it's easier said than done. That tough love is a son of a bitch. At times it is, you're doing them a favor, even though it's so tough.
Yeah, for sure. So he like I said, he got back here at home, and he was doing a lot better when he first got back here. He was staying away from the people who had been a bad influence before. He was staying clean and sober, and he got a job. He was headed in a better direction. But I just felt this pressure the whole time to try to keep him entertained, to keep him out of trouble. And of course, I'm trying to live my life too. And it's just, you can't really do that, but it's a lot of pressure on a parent in that situation. And I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up with that. And I couldn't. And so at some point I began to see the signs that he was relapsing. And again, I did not understand addiction, but I just innately realized that there was something going on that wasn't right, that he was headed back in a bad direction. And he came to me one day and told me that. He said, "Dad, I'm headed in a bad direction again. I'm hanging out with a rough crowd. I know I need to get away from these people. Don't really know how to. So I've taken a job transfer down to Florida, back to the area where he'd been in treatment." There was an older guy that he had been in treatment with there. When I say older than him, probably mid to late 30s. Seemed like a really nice guy. Had met him, and he was going to stay with him and, get work, or like I said, transfer down there with his job. And then, I told my wife, Kim, that Chase was going to move to Florida. And Kim wanted Chase to come by and have a meal with us before leaving. And he promised that he would. Well, the day came that he was supposed to come by and eat with us. He didn't show up. And,
it's not good.
Yeah, not good. Well, it wasn't all that uncommon, that something like that might happen. You know how that goes.
Absolutely.
And so we didn't think a whole lot about it, but we were kind of sitting around in the living room talking, and I had a phone call from a friend, and I didn't want to disturb my wife and my younger son with my phone conversation, so I took it outside. And while I'm standing in the front lawn talking to my friend, it was a beautiful day out. It was May 29th, 2014. This police cruiser pulls up to the curb in front of my house, and it was an officer coming to. I met him in the driveway, and he was coming to tell me that Chase had died in a wreck.
Oh my goodness.
And as we began to get more information about what had happened, we learned that apparently, now this part of it I've never really confirmed, but I suspect it's true. There was a big going away party for Chase the night before, and he and his friends woke up the next morning late, feeling hungover, and they decided to go to a park that's really close to our home, within walking distance of our home, and all smoke some marijuana together there to cope with their nausea that they were feeling from their hangover, and so they did. This part is in the police report. They did go to the park there, and they did smoke marijuana together there. And then they got into Chase's car immediately afterwards. And Chase got into the front passenger seat. It was his car, but he got in the front passenger seat. He let another young lady that was with him. It was a really pretty girl that he had dated at one time. They had kind of a bad breakup, so we're not sure how they ended up, together that day. But he let her drive. She was 18. Another young man got in the back seat. They left the park. They went just a mile or so, and maybe a couple of miles, stopped to grab a quick bite to eat, and headed right out onto I-40 eastbound in rush hour traffic, and only made it another mile or two. She lost control in a curve running about 70. The car left the road and struck a tree. Chase, we're not sure if he was killed instantly, but he died at the scene. So pretty sure if he didn't die on impact, he was probably knocked unconscious on impact, and just never recovered. The car, the tree, was the car kind of rolled up on its side, and the tree came across right where he was sitting, took most of the impact from the tree as it rolled up on its side. So he died from this head trauma. The other two survived, and it took firefighters and emergency personnel almost an hour to get all three of them out of the vehicle. They actually got Chase out first. And as soon as they got the other two out, they had to be transported right away to the hospital. And they would recover over the next several weeks, to the extent that, they could come back home and continue their recovery at home. But then the driver, 7 months later, just a few weeks prior to what would have been her first court appearance, died after a fire broke out in her apartment. And yeah, the fire chief said, based on their investigation, he believes that she poured gasoline all over the floor of her apartment, stood in the middle of it, and ignited it.
Cow.
Yeah, there were two suicide notes.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Did it just eaten her up because her driving with Chase losing his life? Or
that's what everybody assumes. I mean, you would think that's probably it, but I've only seen, I know that there were two suicide notes, one that she published online, and then there was another one that I heard that survived the fire, but I've never seen that one. But the one that was online was pretty vague, so it's hard to really know what was going on in her mind, exactly. But
that's just hard to believe that someone, I mean, I can imagine the what's going on in her mind just had to be haunting her.
Yeah.
Man, just to comprehend the way she did that is just
I know.
understand.
I know.
It's like she needed to torture herself or something. That is just really, I've never even heard of such a suicide.
I know. It was obviously very shocking to everybody, you know, that knew her and the family, and her mother, really nice lady. We had met her and gotten to know her a little bit, and so it was devastating when this happened. Now we're attending another funeral, you know, of a young person, and her mother, I haven't spoken with her lately, but she has just really been through it. I mean, she's had a tough life. Just,
oh boy.
Yeah, she immigrated here from the Ukraine many years ago, and just a lot of things have happened even since she lost her child. She's lost her husband, you know, to an accident, and just a lot of terrible things. So my heart really goes out to her.
And you know, it's so easy for us to judge other people, but we have no clue what they're going through, what's happening. You know,
For
we just need to keep that perspective, because it's, you know, everybody has tough stuff, but you know, geez, something like that's kind of next level. I mean, losing a child is something that I can't even comprehend, you know?
Yeah.
What were some of the things? I mean, how did you and your wife and his brother, you know, handle things? I mean, obviously I would assume because you're Christians, God played a part in that, but
yeah,
you know, a big part, I would assume, but
yeah.
how did that, I mean, what did you do for those that are listening, maybe are in the middle of that situation for an OD or whatever reason? And, you know, what advice could you give them that maybe helped you guys? Obviously, like we've said, you know, they're God, whoever that is to them, but were there other things that you guys did that helped? Or, I mean, it's just one of those things. People say time, you know, and I get that, but man,
time doesn't
because doesn't heal losing a kid, you know?
Yeah, you know, there's some great quotes out there, but that's one of them. You know, there always are quotes that are not really true. Yeah, time does not heal all wounds. I can promise you that. So losing a child, I don't want to diminish anyone else's grief, and I would just say that
Course creators, say goodbye to intimidating software and eliminate multiple subscriptions and say hello to Backbone. Backbone helps course creators thrive with their all-in-one, easy-to-use sales and marketing platform. Backbone gives you all your automation in one place to capture, nurture, and turn more leads into customers. With Backbone, you get unlimited courses, membership sites, funnels, landing pages, surveys, and forms with our easy-to-use drag-and-drop features. That's not all. Backbone provides a full CRM and pipeline management, two-way SMS, workflow automations, call tracking, full analytics, built-in AI, 24/7 support, and so much more. Stop paying for multiple tools and put more money in your pocket with Backbone. Just go to backbonelms.io now to get your free 14-day trial. Backbone supports letthemlive.org to help defend the defenseless by donating 5% of each subscription every month. Jump over to backbonelms.io now to start your free trial today.
I think a lot of people immediately think that losing a child is the most intense grief. Well, it was for me. It's the most intense grief that I've ever experienced, other than having a child in active addiction. I don't know which is the hardest. I think having a child in active addiction in some ways is even harder.
I can see that, I can see that.
There's the uncertainty.
Went through,
Yeah, there's the uncertainty and the anticipation, that something bad is going to happen. Yeah. So, you get a phone call late at night, and immediately, you try to shut those thoughts down, but immediately you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh, is that the police calling? What could they want? It's just, those are the kind of thoughts you have. But yeah, for as far as the healing goes, I would say, first of all, I'm just blessed to have had such awesome parents, and they didn't just talk the talk, they walked the walk, and I got to see that every day growing up. And when I say that, I mean they just poured their hearts out to people and just loved on people, and did things for people. And, they put the action behind their words. So I got to see that, like I said, and that made a big difference for me.
There's a lot more of that,
Yeah, for
That
sure.
love,
That's,
that unconditional, no judgment love. Because like you
yeah,
said, we know what's going on in people's lives. And, I would say the majority, very few people don't have good hearts deep down,
yeah,
You just got to understand that, hey man, we don't know what's happening.
yeah. So my wife and I, we had a slightly different pathways for our recovery from our grief, and like I said, you never get over losing a child, but you can learn how to move on in a positive direction with your life and still find joy and fulfillment in life. And this loss has given me new purpose.
I'm gonna say, yeah, you're doing a lot of great things.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But that has been my way of healing. So my wife, I was self-employed, and I could kind of do my own thing and go at my own pace. She had a job, so that was at the time. She's retired now, but that made our pathway a little bit different in that she was having a tough time, more than what she shared with me, dealing with everything, especially at work and all, and trying to keep up with the pressures of work and dealing with grief and all. I poured my initial grieving process into writing a book.
Yeah.
And then, and I really I honestly, I still didn't understand addiction. And I bashed a lot of people in that book.
Is that the book? Is it The Life Half Lived?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it gets I'm just going to say it like this, I look back on it now, understanding addiction a lot better. And I sort of cringe when I read certain parts of it. I'm like, man, I was so judgmental, people, but apparently it was written the way it was written for a purpose. I do get some negative feedback from some people, but I get a lot of positive feedback, and some from people who are in the recovery community. For whatever reason, it really resonates with a lot of people. Anyway, then the book, and then I started.
Kind of therapeutic for you, then, writing the book.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was definitely therapeutic. I needed to get some of those pent up emotions out, and that was part of my way of doing it. And then I started doing the speaking, and when I first spoke, it was North Carolina Mothers Against Drunk Driving that invited me to speak. It sort of felt like a press event. It was a really short press type event, like I said, and it was about the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program. But I was a mess. I mean, I was an emotional mess, trying to get through that. And then I spoke, a friend got me wanted me to come to his church to speak. And I spoke at his church. And then it kind of went from there. And I began to get more and more speaking opportunities and just doing drug prevention speaking. And as my understanding of addiction got better, my speaking evolved, around that a lot. And so doing all of that was healing to me. And then I guess it was about a little over 5 years ago that I began to facilitate a peer support group for parents, known as PAL.
Was that like a chapter? Or was that something that you created?
No, it was a chapter of a nationwide a nonprofit. It's PAL. It stands for Parents of Addicted Loved Ones.
Okay.
And another lady had founded a PAL group in our area. She had a son that was addicted to opioids, and the church that she was in. I also attended another church that was they had satellite churches out there. She was in one of the satellite churches, and they had in response to the early, the opioid, when everybody began to really become more aware of opioids, the problem with opioids, the church was trying to do some things to help. And so they kind of had a night where everybody came out and gave ideas, and that spawned her to start this PAL club or PAL group in our area. In the church let her use a room there to do that. And I attended some of the meetings. I was coming into it kind of, they had 2 or 3 meetings before I showed up. And she asked me to become a co-facilitator. So when she couldn't be there, I could handle it. And eventually she took on more responsibilities at work and couldn't run the meeting anymore. And so she asked me to take over full responsibility for the meeting. And when COVID, go ahead.
No, I said, wow, that's great. I mean,
so it's a volunteer thing, but when COVID hit, we moved everything online. We had to, and we tried to go back at one point to in-person meetings and doing sort of a hybrid, but not everybody was ready for that. People just weren't ready for it. It was too early. And so we ended up going back to online, and now we have people that come into our meeting. One lady that comes in from outside of the country, from Guatemala, and another lady here in North Carolina, but outside of our area. There's no way either of those ladies would be able to drive to our meeting. So, and we do have I initiated this in-person get-together that we have once a year. And I think we may move it up to 2 or 3 times a year, where we all go out to eat. That's and great. Because we need that in-person, touch too. But that's kind of brings you up to speed with where I am and everything that's going on. And then I started doing the coaching, for parents just in the last couple of years.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, because we need more of that. I mean, there's so many coaches out there. I mean, people like me even, that have been the addict and, can help the addict and things. But, to have parents of the addict, that is such a huge group that needs that,
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, like you didn't even know, you felt helpless like me. I got sober in 2000. And so, the addiction thing wasn't looked at or even talked about much, 23 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember not knowing, because I got to the point where I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired, driving to work many days crying, just not even knowing how to get out, And so I know, obviously you didn't know what to do, and, for people to have something like what you've created and are doing is just such a powerful thing to help people.
Well, thank you. It was really an interventionist that pointed me towards PAL. It's the guy that did the intervention for our son, Chase. And I had reached back out to him after Chase died, just looking for other ways to be able to make a difference. And he pointed me towards PAL. And I thank him for that. And it's been great. This is, like I said, healing for me. And I've learned a lot about addiction in the process, and I learned a lot from the parents in the group. I always learn things from the parents.
Because there's always a different perspective, even though you feel like you've been in it, they're just, and, like you say, we can't see what we can't see. And, there's so many, different experiences out there that help give, insights to things that, maybe we would have never thought of that might make a difference.
That's right. Yeah.
As a recovering addict or alcoholic, the way that, early on after, a year at least of sobriety, you can become a sponsor and things like that. That's truly what fulfills me and makes me feel the best. And, to get through your grief and the things you did, obviously writing the book, but because that obviously, like you said, that released a lot of things, but now look at the impact it's had and having, as well as the things you're doing. I got to assume that that's just so healing for you, just the way you feel as you help other people. There's no feeling like that. I always say on this podcast a lot. has your wife done things her own way that have helped her?
Yeah, and I sort of got away from that part of that story of the healing process, that we had our own paths, and she went to a group called Grief Share.
Okay.
And it's a 12-week course, and a lot of churches around the country host that. It is faith-based, it is Christian-based program. It's a 12-week course, and like I said, churches host it, and everybody who's coming there is they're coming from a lot of different types of grief. I mean, it's not always just somebody who lost a child. There is a program called Compassionate Friends. Compassionate Friends is all about parents who've lost a child. It's a different type of thing. Compassionate Friends, I think they meet, I don't know if it may vary depending on chapters. They either meet once a week or once every 2 weeks. And again, it may vary depending on chapters, but it's a much different format. There's not really a course there that I've seen, or any coursework. It's just an opportunity for parents to come and share. And I think especially when parents are in the early stages of the grieving process of having lost their child, one thing that I want people to understand about that is, don't be scared to talk. If you have a friend who's lost a child, don't be scared to talk to them about that. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in that boat now because of all of the fentanyl overdoses and things like that. Don't be scared to talk to them, and don't, if they want to talk about their child who passed away, let them, because and listen to them, because for the parent in that situation, they want to keep their child's memory alive.
Yeah.
And they want to talk about the things that they loved about their child and that they miss about their child. And, just be sensitive to that and allow them to do that. That's a very important thing.
What for the, because the people, the friends of who had the loss, the friend with the loss, a lot of them, it seems like are uncomfortable, don't know what to say. Do you have any advice for them? Because it's I think it's an awkward situation, for both.
It is awkward.
Probably.
Yeah. And I've been in that situation that felt very awkward myself. And
yeah,
I feel a little less awkward now, having been through that. And I would say the main thing is, don't think that you have to use any kind of a cliche or say something that's going to make a difference. There's nothing you can say that will make a difference really in that moment, especially if you're attending a funeral, or you're visiting with the family after a funeral or something like that. It's the most important thing you can do is just let them know that you're there. Just your being there is important, being there for them. Give them a hug and just say, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for your loss. I mean, that's all you have to do. That just means a lot. And they may not remember. Don't be offended if they don't remember you coming by, months or years later. Yeah, because a lot of people visit.
Shock. I mean,
yeah, you're in shock, and there's everything seems like sort of a blur at the time. But that's what I would say: just be there for them then, and then be there later. Just be their friend later, because once the dust settles and the funeral's over and everybody has gone home, those are some lonely times for people. So just be a friend and be there and reach out every now and then. Hey, you doing okay? You want to talk? You want to get together for a cup of coffee, whatever it is, and just be their friend. That's so important.
That's huge. I know one situation in particular that, two good friends of this family who lost a child, they were so uncomfortable, didn't know what to say or what to do, that the space just grew and grew. It became years before, like, it's like the friendships disappeared, and
Yeah.
it wasn't intentional by either side, but that's the worst thing that could happen. And as uncomfortable it is, I think, like you say, you've got to just, even if it's just a note, if you're uncomfortable speaking it, then use the old snail mail and send a note. Just let them know you love them, thinking about them, and if they ever need anything, just so you touch and base.
And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay
Amen.
to say, hey, I feel a little awkward in this situation. I'm so sorry, and tell me what I can do. Is there anything I can do to make it better for you? And they'll probably say, no, there's nothing you can do. Just be my friend and listen. Be a good listener, times.
That's gotta be the best advice, period, because authenticity, man, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Just being honest.
So, yeah. Yeah. And she went through that grief share program 2 different times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and without me participating, and I should have gotten a clue, right? But I went later on my own, but I did at the end of the second grief share program that she was in. I did go with her to a couple of things that they did together, and it was mostly ladies that were in that group,
Yeah.
But I attended another group, like I said, on my own, just to see what it was all about. And I would highly recommend that for parents who are going through that. And if you're a parent who is grieving over your child who's in active addiction, PAL and other peer support groups are really good for that.
Great. I think that's one of the things that folks need to understand is, you can get so caught up and so, worried and be in codependent relationship with your child or loved one that you don't even realize it, but you forget to even take care of yourself.
Yeah.
That is why I think some of these groups and things are so important, because, then you can, you might be there and speaking about, your situation, but it's also healing and helpful, like you say, just to understand that others are going through what you're going through.
That's right.
Yeah. Because the worst thing you can do is internalize everything. And I mean, that's just taking you down a dark, dark place that is just very unhealthy. And, people do some bad things and end up dead themselves because they just wallow in their sorrow. And, a lot of this stuff is very easy to say. It's not always easy to do, but I think that's when you got to rely on the Lord, even, ask him to give you the courage and the strength to take that step to reach out,
Yeah, that connection with the other parents who are going through the same thing is really important. Because when you, like you were saying earlier, you were talking about how you felt helpless when you were in the throes of addiction. And you feel helpless as a parent when you have a child who's going through that. You helpless and hopeless are 2 words that I hear most often from parents. And connecting with other parents who are going through the same thing. A lot of times people don't feel comfortable talking to their family and friends about what's going on. They don't really understand most of the time. And having someone else like that who understands is important.
Yeah, I think to me, that's a key. It's just no difference in some of the things I teach about business. If you're looking to go from where you're at to, whatever it is your desired outcome is in your business or entrepreneurial journey, find somebody that's where you're, got the destination, already been there, done that.
Right.
And, be around people like that. It's the same concept, and it's so powerful, but unfortunately pride gets in the way a lot, and that's one thing we have to overcome. But so you've gotten obviously very involved. You've got that book. That's something obviously at the end here. When we wrap things up, we'll talk about where people can go and get I think there's a free download, isn't there, for that? Is it an ebook?
Yeah.
That's great. But what are some of the other things? I mean, you're consulting and helping people out. You've got, did you go through some sort of educational process to get certified for something? Seems like I read that. That's why
I did get certified online, through an online course as a family recovery coach.
Cool.
But I would say just working with the parents in the peer support group has been it's just experience. It's mostly just my own experience and experience of working with them and listening to them has led me to where I am today.
You probably learn more that way, honestly.
Yeah,
just real live situations, and gives you insights to build off of. That's great.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things, let's talk about a little bit of, say that parent is listening that has a loved one that's, in the middle of it, what advice would you give them? Because obviously we know that other than like an intervention, the addict is kind of in it, and there's not a whole lot you can do until they're willing to admit they have a problem, or like you say, an intervention that hopefully takes, which isn't easy.
Yeah, so it really just depends on where you are in the journey, and how old your child is. That has a lot to do with it. If they're under 18, you can take different actions, right?
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes that it depends on, you have to look at the state you're in, look at the laws, what the laws say in the state that you're in. But you should be able to force them to go to treatment, which is always better if they want to go to treatment, right? But if they're under 18, you're their parent, you can say, hey, you're going to treatment.
Yeah.
And then there needs to be a plan for, obviously, and I think a lot of people miss out on this. There needs to be a plan for when they come out of treatment. And for teenagers, one of the things that I've seen that's really good is recovery high schools. Because the last thing that you want to happen is for them to go right back to the high school where they were buying their drugs and where they're going to be right back, around those peers, the same peers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting as I look back in my experience, even before addiction, it just looks simply who you're hanging out with, right friends, wrong friends, you're going to do different things. Unfortunately, peer pressure is real. And it's interesting when you look at your addiction, some of the things you did and the people you're hanging around, you're like, man, what was I thinking?
Right.
And then one sign for loved ones certainly, is if that person is really starting to isolate, you're not seeing them and they're trying to avoid situations.
That's right.
That's a big one to be aware of. But that's such a tough situation, because you're sitting there, your heart's getting torn apart, because it's one of those situations where pretty much it's out of your control. Even if they're under 18, yes, you can do things, and you just really need some professional help there, because the worst thing you do is force them, and because that's just gonna build more resentment. So you just gotta, I guess what I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you just have to come from a place of love, even if it ends up being a forced situation. Just express why, don't just show up and do it, and
for sure,
put some effort in and try to really have a heart-to-heart the best you can. That's not easy either. And frankly, when the addict's brain chemistry is shifted because of the drugs they're on, because that's really what blew me away when I got sober. For anyone that's seen that movie 28 Days, that fog lifts. That is real. That is no bullshit. I mean, day I'm sitting there going, whoa, what was I thinking? I was separated at the time and ready to get divorced, and man, it's a real thing. And so, even though you're trying to get through to them, it's not going to be easy, but they still hear it. It's just, they're not going to think and make the decision they, would be very open to, most likely.
Right.
Have that shift in the brain chemistry going on. But it's so tough. And that's why I think somebody like you is such a powerful tool and resource, for people, because, it is such a difficult thing to navigate.
It is difficult to navigate, and there are, every situation is unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's why parents need someone in their corner who can take all those things into consideration, and based on their experience can make suggestions about the best way forward. Sometimes sometimes you could be talking about a matter of life or death, and an intervention, might be the best solution. Or in the case of a teenager, it might be that you do make them go to treatment. That's not the preferred way to do it. That's not what I would ever prefer. But if it comes down to it, I would rather do that and have sort of a pattern interrupt, if you will, and hopefully plant a seed there, than I would to be attending another funeral, of a 20-something-year-old. And so this is just one thing that that you can sort of think about. But yeah, it's the parents really need to get educated on particularly on enabling behaviors. And here's the thing: I think a lot of parents will get, particularly if they're early on in the journey, they might get offended hearing that, thinking that, oh, well, I don't enable my child, and well, the thing is, your child, once they started using drugs, like you were just saying, their brain chemistry changed, and they tend to get stuck at the age that they were, or maybe even regress to an earlier age emotionally. And so they're not behaving like, if let's say you have a 20-year-old that's been using drugs since they were 15, they're behaving more like a 13, 14-year-old. And our natural instinct as a parent is to protect our children. And so there's this whole process, where this transition process where they're growing into an adult. And that's a tough that transition part of the process is tough for parents to go through. Anyway, you have to learn how to let go and watch them make mistakes. But now, when they're acting like behaving like a 13-year-old, we tend to treat them like a 13-year-old. And so we have to learn how to begin to pull back, and it's risky. It's risky because you think, well, if I don't protect them, they're going to die, and they may. That's just the reality of it. They may, but we can manage the risk by managing our own behaviors. And really, it's all out of our control anyway, as a parent. We have influence. We can be a positive influence, and we can use our communication skills to help them move in the right direction. But it's more of a pull, not a push. You cannot really force anyone to change. You don't really have any control over other people.
Yeah, that's so true. I think one positive, going back to the like the intervention or the kind of the force into treatment, positive to that, even though it would be negative up front most times, if you can get them there and they get to that first month, that's when that fog will lift.
That's right.
It's when you're giving them a chance at that point. And so even though it might seem wrong, it might seem like, oh, this is going to be negative, it's going to backfire, they're going to be so PO to me.
Right.
Maybe true up front, but hopefully you approach it the best way possible, obviously, and then get a professional involved if possible, for sure. But then if you can get them to that point, then it definitely increases our odds a bunch,
Out of all the decisions I made early on with our son Chase, I think the intervention was one of the better decisions that I made. And it was a pattern interrupt for him. And when he came back home, we felt like we had the old Chase back.
Oh yeah.
Not just me, but my whole family and his good friends, that weren't using drugs.
Yeah.
The people who were a good influence on him, they were like, well, this is the Chase I knew. And,
I heard that from my parents many times.
yeah.
Once I was back, yeah.
But, the part that where I messed up was I went right back into, I wasn't an enabler to the extent that I was previously, but I was still to an extent enabling him, and so that, I think that's a big thing that I would tell parents, is to have a plan for when your child leaves treatment. And it probably,
right.
What's that?
And with some boundaries set up.
With boundaries, that's right. And
Sure.
it probably will not include them moving back in with you, that, more than likely, because that's you're setting yourself up and setting them up for those enabling behaviors to take place. And when you're doing things for them that they could be and should be doing for themselves, you're enabling and you're not giving them a chance to learn from their mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of that accountability process of just, hey, I'm 20 years old, don't have a job, don't really have a place to stay, but got to go figure this out, And
Yeah.
you can have a relationship where you can give them input and things, but, to be helpful, but not to do that for them,
Yeah. This whole process changed my relationship in a good way with our younger son, which you brought up earlier about him. And I didn't really cover him and how he's doing. He's actually doing really well. He also played football in college and at a Division II school in South Carolina. And he graduated in December with a degree in chemistry, and he's getting ready to attend a chemistry PhD program now.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So he's doing great. Has all kinds of awards and accolades to his name, and has done really, really well. Right after his brother died, there was already tension between he and I because of, how kids are, especially, how boys are when they're going through the puberty and everything, and all the
13 or so when Chase passed.
He was, I think 14. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe 13. I think you're right. I think it was 13. Yeah. 8th grade. Yeah. So he was going through that puberty and everything, and so there was already a lot of tension between he and I, and then that happened and there's more tension. And I finally figured out a couple of different things. I figured out, number one, the mistakes I was making with Chase. And I'm like, okay, I got to fix this. And then I also realized his personality was totally different.
Yeah.
And when I backed off and allowed him to start making more of his own decisions and making his own mistakes, it totally flipped, so that when he went to college, instead of me saying, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do that, he was calling me and saying, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I have an aviation background. And he's recently taken an interest in aviation. So we went to an air show together not too long ago, and cool. We're doing some stuff with Microsoft Flight Simulator together online. And so that's really been a bonding experience.
That's fantastic. Well, Darryl, this has been great. Where can people find you? Or is it just DarrylRodgers.com?
I do have a website, DarrylRodgers.com, and they can download a free version of my book there, the e-version, the ebook, if they want to. They can also go to thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. That's my main website, thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. And I'm on TikTok.
All right.
I'm on TikTok, and I'm the Family Recovery Coach on TikTok. They'll look for that. They'll have a lot of videos there. And anyway, it's been a good way to reach people, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, man, I really appreciate, your time. Obviously, sorry for your loss. I know that, I believe that God has a plan for all of us. It doesn't mean it's an easy plan. It's actually very tough at times, but he won't give us anything that we can't handle. And, I think that your situation has put you in a place where you're already making a big impact. And
well, thank you.
Listening, I'd definitely connect with Darryl, on his TikTok and also check out his website, all that stuff in the show notes, so that, if you're not able to write or if you don't remember it, you'll be able to find it there. But folks, appreciate you being here and listening. And, if you find value in this, please share this and write a 5-star review, if you would, on Apple. That will help this episode get seen by more people that will be able to find this episode that has so much value from a perspective of a parent that will help so many people. So, Darryl, again, thank you. Do you have any final words before we wrap up?
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you being here, allowing me to be here, and appreciate you for everything that you're doing to raise awareness around all these issues. I do have one other thing I'd like to say real quick.
Awesome.
I'm putting together currently, I'm close to rolling out a group coaching program online for
Very
parents.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
So it'll be a little different than the peer support group. It just takes things another step where they will have homework to do, and there's a process to helping them, progress through that journey, that family recovery journey, and get stronger, and learn more about addiction and how they can best support their child who's going through addiction.
Oh, that'll be powerful. Where will that information get put up on your website when that's available?
I will have that up. Yeah, it's not on there yet, but I'll have it up really soon, maybe by the time this episode airs. And yeah.
Excellent. Well, that'll be fantastic, folks. The power of something like that is incredible. I mean, that's where I've actually had some of my best breakouts, with business and things, is getting in groups, the accountability, but also just having other perspective and feedback, in real life time of situation you're in that's very powerful. So that's great. Well, thanks so much for the work you're doing, Darryl. And, look forward to staying in touch. And if there's anything I can ever do, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Same here, Steve.
Okay, we'll do. Appreciate it. Thank you, folks. Have a fantastic day, and we'll talk to you later.